You have to be really intentional about putting a team together.
Crawled out of the pound and started screaming.
How good is Joey Bosa?
Herbert, rolling, looking, throwing, end zone, touchdown, it's intercepted. Derwin James. Derwin was there.
You got to be on a mission every day in the NFL. But even more than that, you got to be on a mission together.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by Charger Bolt Family, Brewery X, and Manscaped. Make sure you use the promo code LAFB20 to get 20% off your next purchase. Go to manscaped.com for more details. This is your first time tuning into the show. Make sure to like and subscribe to us on YouTube. And, of course, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you choose to digest your weekly podcast. Dan, we are now in the single digits of days remaining until training camp takes place. I'm sick of this purgatory, my friend. I'm sick of it. But we've got 8 days, and oh my God, do we have so many things left to get through this week. We're still continuing our training camp positional battles that we've been doing. We've gone through the interior defensive line. We've gone through the cornerbacks. We've gone through the tight ends. And next up on the docket is one of the more intriguing positions that when you look beyond who's starting in this role, virtually every position could be up for grabs. So this is going to be an interesting one to talk about. I can't wait. It's going to all be about the running backs today.
Man, this is going to be a fun episode. I don't think people are ready for some of the stuff we're going to be bringing to them, not only on this episode, but in the next few leading up to the start of training camp and also just going into the regular season, Jake. We have LAFB is getting bigger and bigger. Chargers Unleashed is doing some things. It is a great time to be joining this show. If you have not listened before, welcome. Yes, today we get to talk about the position group of running back. And there are going to be some gems that we talk about today that I don't think folks are ready for. I really don't.
Sidebar, dude. I'm going to start keeping a running tally because ever since the draft, you have been using the term gem. More specifically, when you mentioned Chris Rumpf. And I've noticed it in shows that we've done leading up week to week, but that's just become your recurring word. So, not that it's a bad thing, but
I need a bucket.
I just noticed that. I think that's like your new favorite word to utilize on this show.
Okay, I'm gonna get a bucket, and every time I say the word, I'm just gonna drop like a nickel into it, and we'll see how much we have in the season.
Yeah. So at the end, you can give me that $500, and then we'll be just fine.
Thank you so much for making me feel self-conscious right as we start the show. Can't wait to see how many times we go. Jake, before we move further, how are you doing? Happy 1 week? What, 1.5 weeks till training camp? How are you feeling?
Well, yeah, just about that. I mean, dude, I'm just as I'm feeling the same as you are, and as well as the fan base. Get me out of this purgatory, man. I'm sick of saying the word purgatory. It's that annoying. Get me out of it.
Okay, fair enough. Did you have a good weekend?
Yes, it was very relaxing. Went to a comedy club on Friday. Went out on a Duffy boat around Balboa Pier on Saturday, and then just took yesterday to relax.
You are living, sir. I like it.
You had a good weekend. I already know you're still recovering from your weekend.
One could say that. Yes, I had a nice little barbecue pool thing on Saturday. On Sunday, helped my father set up his Traeger, so ate quite nicely all weekend. Definitely felt it a bit as the weekend progressed. But here we are, and we are this much closer to Chargers football. So without further ado, let's get into it, Jake. We have a position group that a lot of folks, I think everyone talks about Austin Ekeler, but then after Austin Ekeler, like you mentioned, it's all kind of up for grabs. But I don't necessarily know if that's a bad thing. And I also wouldn't be shocked if we actually got into the regular season with all four of these guys on the roster, which we'll get into. But to kick it off, we have to start with the man who's arguably the pound for pound most explosive, strongest player on the Chargers team, arguably in the NFL, in Austin Ekeler. He is healthy. He's rejuvenated. He has come back completely from his injury last year. RB1 in our books and in our hearts. Cannot wait to see what he does this year under new coach Joe Lombardi. Going to be quite the adventure. Jake, what are you thinking about Austin Ekeler this year? Is he your running back one?
Is he my running back? What? Well, I know a lot of people in fantasy football that when their draft selection came up to it, that was what they were hoping for fantasy implications for Austin Ekeler. And again, my condolences go out to all of you who ended up having Austin Ekeler on your fantasy team last year. I remember even being, there you go. I remember even being a conversation about this as far as how that workload was going to be split. But Austin Ekeler, his expectations were so high last year, taking over the mantle after now Melvin Gordon's gone. People were still asking the question, can he be the bell cow back? To me, he had already proved it 2 years ago. I think even in a limited action that he saw last year, he still proved it. But yes, he had to go through some attrition, only ended up playing 10 games last year, 530 yards, 2 touchdowns total from both one receiving, one rushing, which is just, you're not used to seeing those type of stats from Austin Ekeler. In total, just under 1,000 yards from when we're talking about rushing and receiving. He had 530 rushing and 403 through the air. But this was just for Ekeler being out in the part of the season that he was, I think he was still dealing with it truthfully throughout the entirety of the year. And then by the time he came back, he still had to get into full game rhythm. So, there were a lot of variables that went into one of the lesser productive years that we've seen from Austin Ekeler last year, whether you want to say it's his injury, whether you want to say the offensive line, and both questions would be right, or both answers would be right, excuse me. And so, yeah, having him back in this type of role, there's a lot to be excited about. A, not just because he's healthy, but B, especially when we've heard this coaching staff talk more about how they plan on utilizing him in 2021. Who was it? Was it Staley or was it Lombardi that said, it was probably Lombardi who said, I want to put him more in an Alvin Kamara type of role.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating because if we look at kind of like, if we zoom out for a second and look at last year's kind of running back squad in totality, they actually were in the top 10 in the NFL in rushing attempts. They were 9th in attempts, but Jake, this is where it gets bad. 9th in attempts, 18th in yards, which that doesn't equate, 27th in rushing touchdowns. I think they only had 10 all season, and 30th in yards per attempt.
Yeah,
they were almost dead last.
3.8, if I remember correctly, for yards per attempt.
It was so bad that our highest yards per carry average. Want to guess who it was?
This is going to be pretty. Highest yards per carry. That I'm actually going to guess that's Kalen Ballage.
Joe Reed at a hefty 5.8 yards per carry.
On the one carry that he got?
I think he had like 4, but still, wow. Yes. So the yards, the touchdowns, and the yards per attempt have to go up. There's no way you should be the top 10 in attempts, but 30th in yards per attempt. That is just unacceptable. So
agreed.
Chargers went back to the drawing board, coaching-wise specifically, got Derrick Foster from Iowa, who did fantastic, as we'll talk about in a sec, with some of their Iowa running backs, wink, wink. So Chargers have kind of a new philosophy. Joe Lombardi, Derrick Foster, both coaching staff are different. Running backs, Austin Ekeler, I think we're going to see a ton more from him, obviously. Of the leading backs, best one we have, 4.6 yards per carry, 2020. He actually averaged almost 100 total yards from scrimmage for the year. Had 170, I want to say, touches total, which again, very low considering he was out. I get it. All those numbers I will put money on being higher as long as he stays healthy. I am excited to see what Ekeler looks like in this offense because I think we're going to see quite the amount of attempts. That number is going to stay high. But if he's going to take that kind of the Alvin Kamara role, that it wasn't so long ago. I think it's 2019 when Austin Ekeler had arguably the exact same season statistically as Christian McCaffrey. So could Ekeler get back to that form? And if so, watch out. RB1, no questions asked. So what makes him special, as we all know, is how lethal he is in the passing game. And Derrick Foster talks about it. Coach Derrick Foster talked about it. When in passing downs, the most important priority for running backs is to protect the quarterback. Number two is to get open in space and be able to, when your name is called upon, deliver. Austin Ekeler is that in spades. He is very adequate in pass blocking, and also, as we all know, he is absolutely electric with his hands on the ball out of the backfield.
Yeah, it's everything you said there, Dan, was spot on. And as far as just talking about expectations for the 2021 season, you talked about the influx in carries that we should expect from him. I would agree with you. So if you drafted Austin Ekeler in your fantasy football team last year, don't be discouraged from doing it this year. Please don't, because if you go back and you look at, especially during the time that Joe Lombardi was with the New Orleans Saints, look at the statistics that Alvin Kamara put up. It's a great comparison and follows his philosophy on how he loves to get his running backs involved in the game. There should be a huge influx as far as carries goes, not just from the standpoint of wanting to keep the defenses guessing, but again, you're taking pressure off of your quarterback, and especially if this new offensive line that you now have in front of him can't get any worse than what it was last year. So you would expect that to improve, which should ultimately improve the entirety of the running game. So yeah, there's no second guessing here. Danny, it was unfortunate what happened to him from with his injury last year, and when he wasn't there, the running back stable definitely took a step back. It suffered. So obviously, here's hoping for a full, healthy 2021 season for Austin Ekeler, and God damn it, make our running game more productive.
Please. And again, I think we have two things going for us. One, Austin Ekeler is healthy. We already see him doing like one-arm pull-ups and everything. He said it's the healthiest he's ever felt.
The dude's an animal.
Yeah, his workouts are ridiculous. Obviously, our offensive line is worlds better, and I think we're going to see just as much of an impact on the running game as we are on the passing game. So watch out, shout out Rashawn Slater. Hallelujah. Going to maul people in the running game. But then after Austin Ekeler, Jake, this is where it's a toss-up. And, we have Larry Roundtree III, we've got Justin Jackson, we've got Joshua Kelley. All three of them bring somewhat, they all bring different dynamics to this team, but some of it is a little bit of an overlap.
Yep.
Which would you like to start with?
Let's start with Justin Jackson, just considering that he's the second longest tenured running back on this team and from this stable that we're going to be talking about. I just talked about Austin Ekeler having to face attrition for 2021. You talk about attrition for a guy who we've just been waiting to see the consistent shades of what he did just a couple years ago in that Pittsburgh Steelers game. Justin Jackson, as talented of a running back as he is, going all the way back during his time in Northwestern, is an extremely talented running back. And a lot like Austin Ekeler, has tremendous vision, can catch out of the backfield, is a multi-dimensional type running back as far as his talent goes. But when you talk about a guy who has only played in 29 of the last 48 regular season games, it's tough. What is it, the old saying? The best availability is availability.
The best.
The guy. Yes. Yeah, excuse me. The best. I said that. Thank you for correcting me. The best ability is availability. And to his credit, throughout his career thus far, he's averaged 4.8 yards a carry, I believe.
When he's on the field.
When he's on the field, it's great. But he's facing a situation right now, and here was the biggest stat, Dan, that I thought was surprising. And again, we're talking about a guy who had to play against a lot of attrition, not just from injuries, but the coaching staff ended up bringing in Kalen Ballage as a veteran running back, in the middle of last year. And this obviously had to deal with a lot with the Austin Ekeler injury, and of course what was happening with Joshua Kelley, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you did have a coaching staff that definitely favored the veterans more. Here's some stats for you. This is inside the 5-yard line. All right. We don't consider Justin Jackson to be anywhere near like that goal type, traditional, big-bodied back that's going to get you the short yardage. All right. So inside the 5 last year, and these stats are according to FTN, Austin Ekeler had 8% of the carries inside the 5. Joshua Kelley had 28% of the carries inside the 5. Kalen Ballage had 32% of the carries inside the 5. Do you want to know who the next person on this list is?
I'm assuming it's Justin Jackson.
It is not Justin Jackson.
Oh,
Justin Jackson had 0. You want to know who's above Justin Jackson? Justin Herbert had 32% of the carry percentages inside the 5-yard line. If that's not bad enough, let's go a little bit further. Let's take it inside the 10 in same order. Austin Ekeler with 20% inside the 10. Joshua Kelley with 26 inside the 10. Kalen Ballage also with 26% outside the 10. Justin Herbert had 28% inside the 10. And Justin Jackson had another goose egg.
So basically what you're saying is he got 0 snaps inside of the 10-yard line all season.
Yes. Yes. And this is such a critical year for him, considering that the Chargers drafted Joshua Kelley in the 4th round last year. You bring in Larry Roundtree this year, who a lot of people are very, very high on in the 6th round this year. And again, we've said it ad nauseum now. When he is healthy, he can be a dynamic piece to this running back stable.
You all remember his showtime against the Steelers. I mean,
it was awesome. It was awesome. Nobody saw that coming, and it was a shot of adrenaline into the arm for what he brought to the running back stable. And you just thought that moving forward, you were going to get to see more of a 1-2 punch with Jackson and with Ekeler. And it just never ended up coming to fruition. And a lot of that reason was because of the injuries. So he really just hasn't gotten the time to produce. And I think with the investment that the Chargers have put in the running backs over the last 2 years, again, with Kelley and with Rountree, that could be the subliminal shot across the bow warning that Justin Jackson may not be long for this team.
If/when Justin Jackson makes this squad, what do you foresee his role being if/when healthy?
If he's healthy, he can be the number 2 back of this running back unit. There should be no question there. He goes down as one of the most productive running backs that ever came out of Northwestern. Huge type of production. His dynamic is almost to the level of what Austin Ekeler does. When toting the rock or when catching it. Obviously, his pass protection needs a hell of a lot of work in that circumstance. But as a weapon, if you were to tell me that we could set up an offense where we could get both Justin Jackson and Austin Ekeler at the same field and utilize them properly, which I don't think that the former coaching regime had any idea with how to get creative with it. But if you're telling me that you could create a plan that could get both of these guys developed in the running game or the passing game and on the field at the same time, when was the last time that the Chargers you saw 2 running backs out in the backfield and they utilized the plays for them the way that they should have been? I can't
honestly. The last time I could think of was
you got to go back to the LAT days.
I was going to say it's going to be LT Michael Turner. It's probably the last time I remember seeing that. I mean, I guess you can kind of say Melvin Gordon, Austin Ekeler, but not really.
No.
No.
I mean, you could say that considering that you had the flexibility to split Austin Ekeler out wide and you can have Melvin Gordon in the single back formation. But again, to me, it wasn't anything that was going to confuse the defense because, of course, that situation was probably it was 2nd and 18 and the Chargers still decided to run it up the middle and only got maybe negative 2 yards on it.
Yep. Yeah, look, I mean, Justin Jackson, I think all of us, we all like him, but if he can't see the field, there's a difference between like a Derwin James ability and a Justin Jackson. Like Justin Jackson is pretty darn good, but he is not to the level of Derwin James where you can where like the risk is not worth the reward. Derwin James, when healthy, is an absolute stud all-pro. Justin Jackson, when healthy, is a great RB2. Like that, let's just be honest. So the Chargers are not going to hold on to Justin Jackson if he cannot show out this year. They're just not going to. He's not worth the risk. I mean, but again, when healthy, I think last year he had started 4 games. I think he had the same yards per carry as Austin Ekeler. Like, he's good. But you have to be on the field. And especially for someone who's not like one of your best players, a team is not going to risk it for you if you're always hurt. They're just not going to. So that is arguably RB1 and 2. Now, this I think is going to be where the conversation kind of gets a little fascinating, Jake. So we got Joshua Kelley and we got Larry Roundtree III. Joshua Kelley was the rookie last year. Everyone was super excited. He started off with a bang early on in the season. Great kid, great attitude, the best smile I think of any person on this team. But as the season progressed, he kind of tapered off. I mean, he had a really low, I think like 3.2 yards per carry. He had some issues with ball protection, ball security. I know he had a couple really, really bad fumbles. His vision wasn't as good as we would have liked as the season went on. And although the offensive line didn't really give gaps as much as we well would have liked, when they did provide him gaps, he wasn't going down the right ones. So it kind of felt like he lost a bit of confidence. But that being said, like, I don't know, last year was such a weird year for everyone. And I can't imagine it being any easier for rookies, especially running backs, when you're getting thrust into this with Austin Ekeler out. And I don't know, like I'm still high on Joshua Kelley, but like last year was just a weird year.
Yeah, like you said, Dan, the first 2 weeks of last year, you wouldn't have thought that Joshua Kelley was a rookie. You look what he did in the Bengals game, rushed for 60 yards, had his first touchdown in his first game. Then the following week against the Chiefs, the same game that Justin Herbert made his debut, he goes off for 64 yards. And then from there, it was just a complete drop-off. Didn't end up finding the end zone again until week 12 of last year. And obviously a lot of things changed throughout that year. The offensive line continued to play poor. And again, we're talking about a Joshua Kelley who was filling in for a lot of playing time due to Austin Ekeler being out and Justin Jackson being out for certain periods of time. To me, as the fumble started to come, yes, as you mentioned, his vision, just wasn't there. He wasn't seeing the field properly. On top of that, I don't think that this coaching staff did a good enough job to assist in getting his confidence back throughout the year, because this was around the point where Kalen Ballage ended up joining the team. And a lot of people ended up loving what Kalen Ballage did in his short stint with the Chargers.
Yeah, he was surprisingly good. I was not expecting that.
In the few short games that he played in, he was actually pretty productive. And at some points, he was even starting the game. So Joshua Kelley, again, much like the other two running backs we've already talked about, had to go through a lot of attrition. And like you said, Dan, a lot of people were high from what they saw in those first 2 weeks with Joshua Kelley. Hell, I'll even admit it. He was one of the guys in the running backs that we were talking about last year, and we were talking about a lot of them when it came to the draft as far as who the Chargers could target on day 3 as a mid-round draft prospect to add to their running back stable. I said that Joshua Kelley would be a great fit for this team because I thought it added a different type of dynamic. He wasn't the same type of a running back as Austin Ekeler and Justin Jackson was. You go back and you watch his tape at UCLA, he was much more of just that bowling ball. And like those stats that I read off just a couple minutes ago, more of that short yardage goal line type of back that you want for those just nasty grind them up type of yards. And I thought that he was worthy of a 5th round pick. And was I a little bit surprised when the Chargers took him around early? Yes. But I was still actually pretty enthusiastic that they ended up taking him. Unfortunately, he didn't end up panning out as well as we thought. Had the fumbles, had the issues, and things just continued to get worse and worse and worse for him. And, unfortunately for him, he lost out on a lot of playing time to running backs that were being more productive. So as much as I was talking about Justin Jackson and the possibility of him not making the roster, I'm not going to go as it's tough. It's uncharacteristic for the Chargers to give up on a draft pick after only one season, but it's not unheard of. They have done certain things like this before. if you're talking about former 5th or 6th or 7th round picks. During Tom Telesco's early tenure as a GM, this happened. And I think when we get into the next player we're about to talk about, that is Joshua Kelley's biggest competition. I think that it benefits Joshua Kelley for the fact that the practice squads still remain at a high number, obviously due to everything that the league is still going from a safety standpoint and possible emergency situations. So I think practice squad, if the Chargers ended up only going with 3, I think you could get Joshua Kelley back on your practice squad. But if the Chargers go with 4 running backs, I'm going to say it right now, until I see a difference, I'd say that this could be your RB4.
I think you might be right. And there's a couple of reasons for it, but I think you're right. Now, Larry Roundtree III, for folks who have not seen him play, this is kind of where we talk about a little bit of the overlap, because there's a lot of similarities between what Rountree and what Kelley are hopefully going to bring to this squad. Like, both of them are kind of like that big body type. Jake, I don't know what your thoughts on this. I haven't said this to you before. Rountree kind of has like I don't know if you remember the back of the day, like Ricky Williams for the Dolphins. He kind of runs similar to how he ran, kind of, squared up, I don't know. He had really quick feet, physical, bulky. Like, he wasn't going to juke people out of their shoes, but like, he just had this like high motor, really good balance, quick feet. He doesn't have the highest. He's not the fastest. I think he had I think he ran like high 4.6s, which like is not good for a running back. But again, like, that's not what we're needing him for if we're putting him in the goal line or within the 10 or the 20. Rountree absolutely feasted in the SEC.
Oh my God.
While at Iowa. I mean, I think he had 40 touchdowns and 3,700 yards plus for them in 3 seasons. And it doesn't hurt that he also played for the running back coach of the Chargers now, Derrick Foster, while at Iowa. So given the fact that he has played with Derrick Foster, given the fact that he balled out in college, given the fact that he is younger, given the fact that he also, by the way, Jake, played special teams as a returner in college and also punt coverage, which ding, ding, ding. We have heard so many of this coaching staff talk about how important special teams is this year. If there is a reason why Larry Roundtree becomes RB3 and Joshua Kelley's RB4, it is because of Larry Roundtree's versatility. I'm calling it right now. Him being able to be on special teams and have experience doing so is going to pay spades for him. And I don't see that. I think you're right. I think Rountree might be running back 3. And I like Joshua Kelley. Like, both of them have really good upside. But in terms of who I think could provide more versatility and value to this team as like a depth piece, it might be Larry Roundtree III.
Check, 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 check. Every one of those check marks and points you just made are the reasons why Joshua Kelley, to me, is on the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to argue with any of that. One of the best ones that you brought up, Dan, was Derrick Foster. Joshua Kelley was drafted by the old coaching regime. This is specifically who the Chargers wanted to target. This is their guy, if you will. They bring him in, huge production in the SEC. When I saw what his stats were, immediately the funny thing was the first thing I thought of in terms of production was Justin Jackson, because when Justin Jackson was at Northwestern,
Same thing.
I mean, there was a difference of about, I want to say it was maybe about 1,300 yards, because Justin Jackson had over 5,000 during his time in Northwestern and a high number of touchdowns. So I did the exact same thing here, but now we're talking about a guy who puts up these type of numbers in the SEC. And you're talking about in 3 seasons. Yes, not 4 like Justin Jackson did at Northwestern, in 3, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And like you said, Dan, for his way that he runs against bigger body, I think he's 5'10", 210, somewhere around there as far as his size goes. Much more of a bulkier type of guy. runs with a lot of short area bursts. He's not the fastest guy that's out there, but one runs with a lot of short area bursts, has really good vision, protects the football well. And the biggest thing that you brought up there is the special teams versatility. Dabbled a little bit in returner, has that experience on special teams, which God only knows. If you were to tell me that a guy from McDonald's at some point during his life played special teams in high school, I think based off of that experience, we should go out and hire the guy because we need all the special teams experience that we can get right now. So having that type of versatility as a running back, playing on special teams as a 6th-round pick, knowing that that's where you're going to be cutting your teeth to make this roster in the first place. And again, let's not forget, for our good old buddy Fernando Ramirez, this is one of his boys that he's watching out for, specifically for the running backs as well. So a lot of people are high on Larry Roundtree right now, and there's nothing more that you could say. I think that that's all those reasons are the nail on the head why Larry Roundtree should be considered the early favorite to get the running back 3 spot, and that possibly pushes Joshua Kelley to the practice squad.
The only thing that I have seen from him that I think he's going to get coached out of is going to be, and again, this is just my personal opinion, and this could be totally off base. The coaching staff might think, Dan, you're an idiot. He does seem to run a little upright, and I think he can get away with that in college. But like, if he doesn't have that pad level in the NFL, I worry that he's going to get stacked up and pushed back. So he got away with it, and the dude's strong. I'm just saying that's one thing that I hope I can see him kind of get a little bit lower. But I really like Larry Roundtree. I think that's a really good value pick for the Chargers. And it's going to be fascinating to see how this running back position group kind of shapes out as training camp starts. So for the record, do you think that there are going to be 4 running backs who make this team?
4 on the active roster, or 4 total split between 3 and 1 on the practice squad?
Let's go with active.
Active, I say that we will only have 3 on this roster.
And then in that case, is Kelley the one that is odd man out, in your opinion?
He is.
Is there anything that Kelley can do between now and the end of training camp to show you that he is RB3 or 2?
This is what the preseason games are for, my friend. I mean, for everybody that wants to downplay the preseason, did you miss it last year? Because I sure as hell did. You have no idea how jacked I am to see 3 preseason games. All right, you got your wish. 1 less game of preseason. But now all this does is truncate the timetable for guys who are trying to make this roster. It gives them more of a limited opportunity to do it. But it's also on the coaches to make sure that they're giving everybody the adequate playing time in order to properly evaluate who they have on the roster. So Joshua Kelley is, hey, get your reps. Don't lose your reps during practice. Don't make mistakes. And show out in the 3 preseason games that you're going to get an opportunity for. Now, I'll say this right now. I think that they'll start him at the running back 4 position. I do. So if you see Joshua Kelley, it's definitely not going to be until the second half. And depending on how many times or how much playing time they're going to give their starters in now only 3 preseason games, it's probably not going to be till the second part of the 4th quarter. So I think that they'll start him there. If he produces well, that's his opportunity to move up. I'm sure at one point or another in these 3 preseason games for the final 2, the coaches will probably rotate, and they'll probably just do it for evaluation purposes to give him a little bit more playing time. Let's see what he does with it. Is he getting any better? And unfortunately, if not, then yeah, I think that he's the odd man out of this group.
Yeah, it's gonna be wild. I think Derrick Foster, there's some interviews he had back in college in Iowa, and he kind of talked about having to work with like a running back by committee squad, which is the same thing he's going to have now. Like there isn't one kind of turnkey running back that he's going to have for all downs. He's used to having a running backs by committee, which is what we have here in LA. I'm curious to see how he kind of imposes his style on these running backs. I think you're going to see a huge emphasis in protecting the quarterback and pass blocking for these running backs, which I think is where someone like a Larry Roundtree actually might be able to shine a little bit, might be able to separate himself as running back 3. The whole position is going to be fun, but I am feeling good about this squad as a whole. I think it's a really good complement to Justin Herbert in this passing offense. The rushing blocking is going to be so much better. And as long as this running back squad can stay patient and let the offensive line do their job, I think we're going to see remarkably improved numbers from the squad. So, for example, going back to the top, Jake, 9th in attempts, 18th in yards, 27th in rushing touchdowns, and 30th in yards per attempt. I can see that number in attempts kind of staying the same. That number of yards should damn sure go up.
It has to get better.
Yep. 27th in rushing touchdowns. That is unacceptable. And if the Chargers end up 30th in yards per attempt again, Brandon Staley is going to blow a gasket. There's no way.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way.
How about more air guitar celebrations in the end zone?
Yes,
you got to give me more. Give me more than 2, baby. Come on, give me more than 2. I know we can generate that.
And when he does, SoFi is about to get cray-cray. I know he's been imploring Bolt fam all offseason to get ready for the season. So I can't wait to see the first time he scores a touchdown in SoFi. It's going to be fun. So, Jake, that is going to do it for the running back position battle episode. Again, thank you to our sponsors at Charger Bolt Family, at Manscaped, at Brewery X. We have a ton of crazy, exciting stuff going on. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag yet, but Chargers Unleashed is about to level up again, and I cannot wait till we get to share it with all of you. Myself, again, yes, we're going to keep sharing again and again and again and again. For my lovely co-host, Jake Hefner, you can find him on Twitter at Jake T. Hefner. Myself at Chargers Homer. You can find us on Twitter at LAC_Unleashed. Oh, I said that wrong. Be sure to. That'd be an interesting name.
A whole different podcast.
Yeah, different. In the interim, if you like what you hear or see, probably more hear than see because our ugly mugs aren't doing it for you. Be sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Again, like Jake said, subscribe on YouTube. But until next time, this is Chargers Unleashed, and we will talk to you next on the next position battle coming up soon.
The Los Angeles Chargers select Rashawn Slater.
Asante Samuel Jr.
Stop! Oh, I'm stopping y'all boys. I can't catch me.
Intercepted. Picked up by Michael Davis. Explosion. Explosiveness from Ekeler. There's Murphy. Boy, he blew that up, didn't he? It is picked off. Nasir Adderley. 50-50 ball is 100%. Mike Williams. Ochena Nwosu. And that will end it. Time to bolt up.